I'm running because I understand exactly what those workers are going through. And in many ways, I believe I'm the only one in this campaign who deeply, deeply, deeply understands what those workers are going through. Because I've been living in communities like that my entire life. My grandfather was a steel worker. My wife is from that community. Her dad worked in a steel mill, lost his job 40 years ago when they shut the gates down. I could tell you a story about my cousin Donnie, who was a Vietnam vet. His last act at the company he worked for was to unbolt the machine from the factory floor, put it in a box, and ship it to China. Okay? And then I can go back a couple weeks, and it's been in the New York Times above the fold about the General Motors plant that has closed. And that plant used to have 16,000 people. And when these plants close, I know who's working in them. They're my family. They're my friends. The first place I went when they laid off the last shift at General Motors was to go to the Union Hall and put my arms around those workers because I know them. And to your question, I've been telling people in my community since I started in politics, the steel mills aren't coming back. I've been telling them the truth for 20 years. And I've been doing everything in my power to bring money back, use my congressional position on the Appropriations Committee the last 17 years. I brought back hundreds of millions of dollars to my community to start an energy incubator, to work around additive manufacturing and 3D printing, to move our community into those future industries. That's what I want to do as President of the United States, because these folks, my folks, our folks, are forgotten. They're black, they're white, they're brown, they're gay, they're straight, they take a shower after work, and when I'm president, they're not going to be forgotten anymore. When I walk into the White House every morning, when I walk into the Oval Office every morning, no one's going to have to explain to me why I'm there or who I'm there for. Okay?
So, Congressman, let's talk a little bit more about General Motors, because let's talk a little bit more about General Motors, and I really appreciate that question. It's your district, the Lordstown plant. I've spent so much time there reporting on it for the last decade. And the president, as you know, has threatened to cut subsidies, for example, for General Motors. And I'm interested, if you were president, because you've called General Motors greedy, you've said they turned their back on us when we needed them most. Should there be consequences for U.S. companies that shutter plants and lay off hundreds or thousands of American workers?
And what you said, I meant. Okay?
So what would you do, right? Should there be consequences for those companies? It's a real question of, do you let capitalism run its course, or do you subsidize?
I believe that the tax code and the trade agreements in the last 40 years have devastated our country. They've been written for the corporations. You can see it with the pharmaceutical industry, the manufacturing industry, whoever it is. Those agreements don't even concern the worker. It's been a race to the bottom in the world for the last 30 or 40 years. And the middle class in the United States has been eviscerated because of that. And we live with this every day. The schools don't have funding. The mental health board doesn't have funding. The libraries don't have funding. So you fix the tax code by not incentivizing General Motors to move their company to Mexico or to move their production to South Korea. So work on the tax code. And I believe we have to have trade. We've got to engage the world economically, but we've got to do it in a way where we're lifting up their labor standards, their environmental standards, their human rights standards, more in line with the West, Europe, Canada, the United States. And so I don't want any punishment, but let's write the rules to where they're going to want to invest in the United States. And I do, just lastly, I do believe we need public-private partnerships. We've got to save capitalism from itself right now. And every economic project I've done locally in Youngstown, Ohio, in Akron, Ohio, in Warren, Ohio, we sit down with the business community, the investor, the Port Authority, the local economic development organizations, the local workforce organizations, the congressmen, the state reps, the mayors, the council. You got to build a team. And to the last gentleman's point, that's what I want to do as president when we're talking about winning the future around electric vehicles or solar or wind or additive manufacturing. Build the team and let's go and win the future. climate change is one of my top priorities. When I referred to climate change being a luxury for some people to think about, I'm talking about the auto worker that just lost their job and can't pay the mortgage and may have to leave their kids to go work in another factory and not sure what their future looks like. And my argument is we've got to understand that they don't have the bandwidth to talk about climate because they're worried about putting food on the table for their kids. And they're worried about where their next paycheck's going to come from. And so I talk about climate in the sense, and I have 3 kids. Mason's 16, Bella's 15, Brady's 5. Will be 5 on June 12th, which he reminds me of every time I talk to him. And he's been reminding me of that since January. This is a jobs program. I talk about reversing climate change as a jobs program. We should dominate the electric vehicle market. We should dominate the battery market. We should dominate the charging stage market. You know who dominates the electric vehicle market now? China. 40 to 50% of the electric vehicle market is China. We should dominate the solar market and manufacture those here in the United States. Who dominates the solar market? China, 60%. We should dominate the wind market. We can reverse climate. Let's talk about it in the context of jobs. Solar's growing at 30% a year. Wind's growing at 20% a year. We're going to make 30 million electric vehicles in the next 10 years. I want those made in the United States. And let's steer the investment to the communities that have lost. Communities of color, old coal, old steel, old auto, old rubber.
We're going to talk a lot about China.
China is a huge issue, an issue and a relationship I've been working on for 17 years. I was one of the original co-sponsors back in the day for a China currency manipulation bill to punish the Chinese for manipulating their currency, making their products cheaper to be dumped on our country. So I've been studying this relationship for a long time. I believe in targeted tariffs. We've had steel dumped in Youngstown, Ohio, which means they send a bunch of steel to our country. It's put our steel workers out of business. It's put a lot of steel companies out of business because the price is so cheap. So I'm for targeted efforts to do that. But this particular issue about tariffs needs to be part of a larger strategy against China. China is on the move. China is our #1 threat. We have a relationship, but they're a threat. They want to take us out economically. And they are building islands in the South China Sea. They're building ports in the Middle East. They're building rail lines from northeast China all the way to Rotterdam. They are signing long-term raw material contracts in Africa to feed their industrial machine. They want to dominate the top 10 industries in the world around additive manufacturing, wind, solar, artificial intelligence, all the rest. Trump does not have a big strategy. He has a tactic that gets him on TV because he sends a tweet out, tariffs are on, tariffs are off, and the media runs with it all the time, and it changes the subject, and he can look tough. We're getting our clock clean. We talked earlier in the night that 40 to 50% of the electric vehicle market, 60% of the solar market, they're running circles around us with 5G, 5th generation internet. We need an industrial policy in the United States if we're going to take on China. And if you think that makes sense, what I just told you, I need your help. I need you to go to timryanforamerica.com and listen to what I'm saying about China. Listen to how long I've been talking about this. Because when I'm president, that's going to be the #1 issue that the president is going to have to deal with, our long-term relationship with China.
So Congressman, you do support, as you just said, again, some tariffs, okay? So there would be some tariffs under a President Ryan. Tariffs, we all know, we pay for them. They're a tax on the American people. So wouldn't continuing at least some of the president's tariffs hurt the very people you're trying to help?
Yeah, well, depends if it's targeted. His are not targeted.
But it's still, you know what I mean? It's still a tax.
I understand. But we're in a very complicated relationship with them. It's about sitting down and working it out. I'm for taking a strong position and then negotiating from a strong position. He's taking a punch, and we have no clue what the plan is, what the strategy is. And our farmers are getting hammered. We are having a recession in rural America right now. And they're sending money to China. They're sending money. The president is on his second payment to the farmers. They don't want a payment. They want to be able to sell their product, and we need to be able to do that. And oh, by the way, Poppy, he made a lot of promises to the auto workers in Youngstown. I think it would be nice if he's spending, $20 to $30 billion helping farmers deal with a crisis. He could spend $1 billion, help General Motors open that factory back up in Youngstown, Ohio, and we can start producing electric cars, and we'll kick China's butt that way instead of what he's trying to do now. We have experienced this in my community for a long time now. I'm co-chair of the Addiction Treatment and Recovery Caucus, and we were able to make some small steps forward with the CARA bill, a comprehensive addiction and recovery bill, to get money down into the local communities. We've got to also be very firm with the pharmaceutical industry. I love seeing these lawsuits come against the pharmaceutical industry that would make sure that there were thousands and thousands of opiates that were getting to communities in West Virginia, to where everybody in the town had 30 or 60 pills. It's ridiculous in the United States, and they were making money off it, and I'm cheering on this lawsuit. So thank you for your question, but this is a long way we have to go on the addiction issue, which is one of the reasons we also need some kind of public option in the health care bill to make sure everybody has access to treatment.
You're talking about the lawsuit in Ohio that is about to begin, the one in Oklahoma, a civil case going on right now. We're all watching very closely. Your fellow competitor for the presidency, Beto O'Rourke, says said this in the CNN town hall, there have to be legal consequences, including jail time for drug manufacturers. Do you agree? Jail
Yes.
time for these pharma executives if found guilty?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk more about this, because again, look, your state, Ohio, ranks second in the nation for opioid overdoses. I've spent a great deal of time with our team reporting across Ohio, sitting in the basement of a home with parents who lost their 20-year-old son who's a baseball player. They had no idea. The sheriff of another Ohio town, the sheriff's wife, got addicted to opiates. No one is immune from this.
Yeah.
What are we getting wrong as a country on this?
Some of it we already talked about, as far as the pervasiveness of the drugs, the quick knee-jerk reaction to use painkillers as a response, too much so. But I don't think you can have this conversation without talking about the despair that's out in our country today. And this is why I say, I don't think we're getting it. I feel like I'm one of the only people who really understand, because I'm living in the middle of the economic devastation and the opiate crisis, which is why I think we need a president of the United States who understands this. When you look across the board, you see many of these communities that have economic despair also end up falling into addiction and deaths of despair and suicide. This is not the way the United States should function. We are supposed to take care of our own people in the United States, and we've failed them. We failed them economically, we failed them with health care, we failed them with pensions, and we failed to address some of these basic needs that they have, that if we were committed, we could save a lot of lives in the United States. And what happens is people had jobs that were paying 30 or 40 bucks an hour. Now they're making 12. Now they're making 13, and the president's running around saying the economy's booming. It's not booming. It's not booming. And so, which is why one of my first initiatives is to have an industrial policy in the United States. We've got to get the job numbers, the wages up $30 an hour, $40 an hour, $50 an hour, so people can work hard. And if they hurt their back, they're going to want to go back to work because they got a little fishing boat, they can take their kids hunting, they can go on a little vacation. But when you're making 12 bucks an hour and you hurt your back, all of a sudden, and things aren't well, you start taking some pills, you feel a little bit better, and that's been the story we've seen for a long time in Ohio. I have made it a point, because people do try to say, oh, Tim Ryan's a white Irish guy from Youngstown, and I make it a point. This is not about the white working class. This is about white people, black people, brown people, gay people, straight people. Men, women, north, south, urban, rural. This economy is not working for anybody, well, just the top 1% pretty much, or the top 5 or 10% of the people in the country. And so I think it's critically important that when I talk about electric vehicles and all these other projects and growing the pie, I will have concrete plans on how to steer that investment into communities of color, into the communities that have been left behind. Now, a lot of people don't know, but Youngstown, Ohio is 50% African American. I've been working on these issues a long time. We need to address, when it comes to African American women, what's happening with their health 300 to 400 times. 300 to 400 times higher percentage of death in pregnancy or childbirth, even along education and wealth income levels. That's an issue we need to address. An African American baby born in Youngstown, Ohio, has a higher infant mortality rate than a baby born in Iran. I am deeply committed to these issues around justice when it comes to the African American community, and you can bet that I will surround myself with men and women in my administration that will help us put an excellent plan together to make that happen. Thank you.
So, Congressman, on that point, and thank you, Kish, for that question. On that point, you said just a few months ago, let me quote here, "I don't necessarily think we need another white guy for president." Of course, that struck me. It struck a lot of us when you said that. Whether you are on the ticket or not, are you comfortable with an all-white, all-male ticket for the Democratic Party in 2020?
No, absolutely not. We have to, our ticket and the next president's cabinet must reflect the diversity of the country. And I'm committed to do that.
And you said, quote, "In some areas of the country, yes, she is." Mm-hmm. Do you stand by that today?
I think things have shifted a little bit given President Trump's performance, but I'm sure there are areas still in the country where President Trump is more popular. But her approval ratings have gone up significantly. And my whole thing the whole time was like, look, we've become a coastal party. You know, we feel forgotten in the industrial Midwest. We feel forgotten many in the South. And my whole pitch was like, we need to be represented. No one is hearing us. We are forgotten here. We signed these big trade deals, globalization, automation. It's like, we're over here waiting. How about us? How about us? We're Americans too. It was great when we were building the steel and building the cars, and now all of a sudden they say, there's a great line from the Bruce Springsteen song about Youngstown. Oh, you told us times have changed. Once we made you rich enough to forget our names. That's how we feel. And so my pitch for Democratic leadership was like, we need people, not just another generation, but people from parts of the country that have been forgotten. And that's why I'm running for president, because I'm not going to forget. I'm from there. I live there. My family's there. We go to school there. And so I want an opportunity to represent the entire country, all of the forgotten communities, all of the forgotten people across the United States. I want an opportunity to walk into the White House and pull every lever possible that the President of the United States has on behalf of the working class. White, black, brown, gay, straight. I will be a working class president for the American people.
Let's talk about you for a moment. Politicians don't like to talk about themselves.
I guess
but
you can twist my arm.
Let's talk about you for a moment.
Yeah.
High school quarterback.
Yeah.
President of your fraternity in college. Congressman. Yogi?
Yeah.
True story?
No question. I love doing hot yoga. I did not take you for a hot yoga crowd at all. I learned centering prayer, which is a Catholic-based meditation from a priest friend of mine back home, and that sent me on a journey where I then went on mindfulness meditation retreats for 5 days, 7 days. I've done several of those before I was married with kids.
Right.
When you had time.
There is no time.
Yeah,
I am not going to go home and tell my husband that I'm going on a 7-day
I'll see you in 7 days.
silence retreat. But I would like to do that.
Yeah,
but you went and you sat in silence for like 36 hours?
Yeah. Well, and in a week. Yeah, it's an amazing experience. It reduces your stress level dramatically. I mean, it's no phones, no journaling, no TV. And so it's been great because there's so much research on it now, how much it can help kids, how much it can help people who have addictions, just generally for all of us where stress is a huge killer. It's a very simple practice that has no side effects.
How has it changed you?
Well, the stress level is different. I think you start to see through a lot of the BS, and you kind of cut through the noise, which has been very helpful in politics in the last few years. It helps you see how things are interconnected. It helps you really see a little bit deeper into people, kind of looking into their hearts and really see what's motivating them, a lot of the trauma. I mean, you look at what's happening today with so many of our kids that have so much trauma, the adverse childhood experiences that they have. This is a real focus. Putting social and emotional learning in the schools is like a really big part of my educational plan because it deals with the kids' trauma. And if you don't deal with the trauma, the brain doesn't function properly. We've learned more about the brain in the last 20 years than we have in the previous 200. And if you don't understand, if you don't take care of the kids' trauma, you're not going to be able to teach them.
If people want to know more, you've even written a book on mindfulness.
Yeah. Let me first say we've covered a lot of ground. TimRyanForAmerica.com. If you go to my website, we'll outline all of these issues that we covered tonight and didn't cover tonight, even including mindfulness and yoga with veterans, really helping them heal, which is transforming their lives, which has been amazing. I have been on the Medicare for All bill since 2007. I believe that the very next step we have to take is to have a public option so that everybody can buy affordable, accessible health care. But I also believe that we need to have another conversation. The current system is a disease care system. It's a sick care system. Wait till we get sick, throw a bunch of money at it. Pharmaceutical companies make a bunch of money. Insurance companies make a bunch of money. We need to have a conversation about health in the United States. We need to have a conversation about our food system in the United States, and we need to have a conversation about our agriculture. We need to also have a conversation about our agriculture system in the United States and what kind of food are we producing? How do we move to a more regional, sustainable agriculture system? We are destroying our soil, destroying our environment. We lose 220 cubic tons of fish in the Gulf of Mexico every year because of what we're sending down the Mississippi River that runs into the Gulf of Mexico. We need to talk about incentivizing doctors and patients to be healthy, pay doctors to help get us healthy, reward patients with rebates and refunds to stay healthy. These are critical components of how we stay healthy. 75% of our healthcare costs in the United States are from chronic diseases that are largely preventable. Preventable, $2 to $3 trillion a year. So my health care plan is make sure we get everybody covered, mental health, addiction, all of these critical issues that are facing people today. But let's flip this system and get people healthy. You want to knock the knees out from the pharmaceutical industry? Let's all say, how do we get a little more healthy in the United States so we don't need the damn pharmaceutical industry? We save that money for people. We save that money for people who are really sick and can't change that through their diets or other things. The money should be reserved for those people. Get out of the disease care system, move it to health, food, and take care of our soil.
Congressman Tim Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all.